The Executive Branch, the Presidency, Part 1. The President is the head of the Executive Branch. Our current President is Barack Obama, who is the 44th President of the United States. His responsibilities and duties are outlined in Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Article 2 can be broken up into 4 sections. The first section describes who can be president and how we elect one. The second section describes presidential powers. The third describes presidential responsibilities. And the fourth describes impeachment and punishment of the president. Who can be president? The qualifications are really quite simple. There are only 3. You must be, number 1, a natural-born citizen. That means that when you were born, you were a citizen of the United States. This is as opposed to naturalized. Many folks come to the United States and then petition to become U.S. citizens. And if this is the case, they are not actually qualified to be President of the United States. They must have been natural-born citizens. Number 2, the President must be 35 years old or older. And number 3, the President must have been at least 14 years a resident of the United States. They serve for 4-year terms. Originally, there was no limit set on how many terms you could serve. So you could serve 4 years, and then another 4 years, and then another 4 years. However, then later on, we had an amendment that said that you can only serve 2 terms or 10 years. So how does this work? This means that if a president is elected, like Mr. Obama, and then he is elected again, he will have served for 8 years. Therefore, he served his 2 terms and he can't run again to become president. So how does the number 10 come up? If we know that 2 terms is 8, when would we ever have a president serving for 10 years? Well, here's one way this could happen. The vice president takes over the president if the president dies or is unable to continue his term. So say the vice president takes over after a president has served for 2 years. The president then steps down, the vice president steps up, and the vice president now has 2 years under his belt as the president of the United States. The following election comes up, the vice president, now president, can run again. This time the vice president, now president, will be running as president of the United States for the first time. And so if he wins, he will have served those 4 years plus the 2 years that he served when the initial president had to leave office. So that's 6. Then that president can run for re-election and serve another 4 years, and that would make it 10. Now you can see how this could be a little bit difficult, because it really depends on when that vice president takes office. If the vice president took the president's job in the middle of his term when he had 2 years left, then yes, he could serve those 2 and then run for another 2 terms. But what if the vice president took the office when there were 3 or 4 years left? There have been instances of presidents dying early in their terms where the vice president has had to step up almost immediately. In this case, say for example the vice president has to serve out 3 years of the 4-year term for the president. The following time that the vice president will run as president, he'll start a term which will then give him 7 years. And so he would not be able to run again because 7 plus the 4 would give him over the 10-year mark. Think of it like blackjack. You don't want to get over 21. In this instance, you don't want to get over 10 years or 2 terms. Compensation of the president is always fixed during office. That means it cannot be changed within that president's term when they're in their office. And currently it is set at a $400,000 base salary. Base salary means that doesn't include any expense accounts, any perks or travel reimbursements, those types of things. But that's the base amount that the president is going to get paid. The president also comes in with a vice president. It's a 2-for-1 deal. The vice president is elected with the president on the same ticket, and you will elect them both at the same time in a presidential election year. When the framers were trying to decide how to elect a president, they had a dilemma. They wanted to decide whether or not to choose the president by the state legislatures or by popular vote, which meant bypassing the legislatures and taking the vote of all of the common citizens. The compromise that they came up with was something called the Electoral College. You may have heard of it before. Now, the Electoral College is a little bit of a strange device, so let's take a little bit of time to take a look at it and see how this works. Basically, the Electoral College has 3 steps. The first step is that each state appoints its electors. The second is that the electors that are appointed are equal to the number of seats in Congress. So, the number of seats in the House of Representatives for that state plus the number of seats for the Senate. So, for example, in California, we have 53 members of Congress, and then members of Congress who are serving in the House of Representatives, and then we have 2 senators who are serving in the United States Senate. So if you add those together, we will have 55 total members of seats in Congress who have seats in Congress, and therefore we will get 55 electors. The electors, in step number 3, would then vote for the president. Now, why do we have such a complicated system? It was actually because the framers were thinking about who should be the one to put someone in office. And remember, at the time, we had a situation where we had a very large citizenry who was not necessarily educated, not necessarily informed about the politics in the day. They were largely removed geographically from what was going on in the centers of government. And so the framers wanted elite electors to vote because they figured this large citizenry, this large group of people, they're not going to be able to make an informed choice. How can they choose who's going to run for president? They're not going to have any idea who these people are. They're not going to have any idea what's good for them. And so we need to choose select people who can make a choice for them that's going to be a good choice. And that's how it got started. And we still have that system today, even though we've eliminated very much of what the framers thought were issues in the beginning in terms of not being able to have the information needed. The worry is still there that this tyrannical tide could come up and people could decide they want something completely different than what they have. And so this is just another step that they put in there to make sure that we have a system which has that other layer of insulation between the people and their government. Members of Congress and federal employees cannot serve as electors. Aside from that, they can be appointed by the state legislatures do get to choose the electors in that the state political parties get to choose slates. And so within each state legislature, you are going to have political parties, and the political parties are going to appoint slates of electors. So the Democratic Party will appoint a Democratic slate of electors. The Republican Party will appoint a Republican slate of electors. Normally, these folks who are appointed as electors are not random. They are people who regularly give money to the party, who are very supportive of the party. Remember, you want to appoint electors who you're sure are going to vote for your political party or vote in the way that the party is going to dictate. So they're going to do a lot of work to make sure that the electors they put in place are going to be people who are very party loyal. Now, as I mentioned before, the number of electors is going to equal the number of Congress people. So in South Dakota, for example, each elector is going to represent 232,000 people, while in New York, each one is going to represent 550,000 people. And this is because of the issue that we have of proportional representation and the way that we have representation in both the House and the Senate. So in this case, you'll have an elector in South Dakota who has more power. Each voter, in South Dakota is going to have more power because they are representing a larger chunk of each elector than, say, someone in New York. This is a little bit difficult to think about, so think about it in this way. Think about it being you are appointed to figure out what ice cream flavor 5 people in the room want. And then the person next to you is appointed to figure out what ice cream flavor 10 people in the room want. Well, that first person who has the 5 people they represent is going to have those 5 people's voice, and they're going to have 1 vote. And so if those 5 people decide they want vanilla, then that person is going to vote vanilla. Now say the person who's representing 10 people says, okay, I'm going to see what type of ice cream flavor you want, but I'm still only going to get one vote also. And so if those 10 people want chocolate, and the 5 people from the previous individual want vanilla, each of those 2 electors' votes are going to go head to head, vanilla versus chocolate. It doesn't matter that there were 10 people represented in the chocolate group and 5 people represented in the vanilla group. And so that's what we're looking at here when we're talking about representation in the number of electors. When I say that South Dakota, for example, has one elector who's going to represent fewer people than New York, who's going to have one elector represent more people, it's just like the vanilla and chocolate example. You have a situation where the particular votes of the individual in South Dakota are actually worth a little bit more than the people in New York, because at the end of the day, each elector is only going to have one vote. The electors are certified by December 12th, and then they get on to do their work. So here's how the Electoral College works today. Number one thing I want you to understand, and this blows people's minds, so don't be surprised, but there is no constitutional right for individual citizens to vote for president. Let me say that again. There's no constitutional right for you and I to actually vote for who gets to be the president of the United States. This is amazing. I've been led to believe differently for so long. However, there's actually nothing in Article 2 when you read it that says that that's how the president is going to be elected. And what actually happens is that when normal voters like you and I go to the polls, we vote for the electors. Now, the electors, of course, are going to represent the candidates. So we're not going to go in there and see names that we don't recognize. We're going to see John McCain. We're going to see Barack Obama. We're going to see the names that have been actually, they've been advertising. We're going to see the people who've been out there. And we're going to cast our votes. And our total votes are going to be what is called the popular vote. However, we have a system called a winner-takes-all system. And the way this works is that the majority of the electoral votes is going to win all of the state's votes. And this happens except in Maine and in Nebraska. So, for example, we have California, which has 53 electoral votes. The people are going to go in and they're going to cast their votes, and they're going to cast their votes for the candidate of their choice, or so they think. And they're going to go in and they're going to vote for, say, Barack Obama or John McCain. And they're going to come out of there. Now, what's going to happen is that in these different electoral districts, the electors are going to be chosen based upon how those people voted. So, if, say, 35 of those people, I should do math that I can do easier. Let's say if 50 of those people voted for Barack Obama, and 3 of those people voted for John McCain, then it'll be easy to sort out. The way that this happens is we have a certain percentage that are going to vote. Say the certain percentage of California makes up those 50 people, right? So that percentage, whatever that is, the 99% of the people go and they vote for Barack Obama. That means that 50 electors from the Democratic Party are going to get to vote. Now, on the other hand, we have 3. So the percentage, the 0.1%, which makes up those three electors, are going to be put in there by the Republican Party. So you have 50 Democratic electors, you have 3 Republican electors. We can guess who's going to get the vote. So even though the popular vote might have actually been that, say, 51% went for a Democratic candidate, and 49% went for a Republican candidate, the winner-takes-all system says that whether it's 99% to the one or whether it's 51% to the 49, whoever gets more is going to get all of the electoral votes for the state. So it doesn't matter if the Democrats got 50 and the Republicans got 3. Those 3 are going to be erased, and the Democrats will take all of the electoral votes for that particular state. Easier when it's a 50 and 3 breakdown, much harder when you have a situation where it's evenly split, or when we're looking at a very close race where it's 51% to 49. The only states that do not do this are Maine and Nebraska. They've chosen systems which do not function in this way. The states then seal the votes, and they send them to the President of the Senate, and they are opened on January 6th. So at this point, you may be wondering, January 6th, okay, the electors just got certified in December, and then January 6th is when we have the votes being sent to the President of the Senate. What's November 4th? What actually happened there? And how is it that we get to sit up all night and watch C-SPAN or watch CNN or watch, frankly, any news channel out there, watch Indecision on Comedy Central to find out who won, and we get those numbers on November 4th? Well, what happens is, when we get the popular vote numbers, we're going to guess how the electors are going to vote. So say the popular vote numbers come in, and we see that 80% of California has gone blue, has gone Democratic. We can guess that those Democratic electors who are going to be put out there to vote for you, who are going to be the ones who actually get their votes, are going to choose Democratic. And that's how, when we're looking at this map coloring itself across the evening, they'll say, and Washington has gone blue, or North Dakota has gone red, or whatever it is. It's saying those number of votes, those Electoral College votes, are going to go to that particular party candidate. In this map that you're seeing here, this is from the election, the Obama-McCain election, and this has the different states and the number of electoral votes that each of them had. And so under California, you can see the 55. Under North Dakota, you can see 3, for example. And this will tell you, this was during the evening, and this was talking about how many votes we thought were going to go for those particular candidates. In California, the popular vote came in. It was overwhelmingly Democratic. And so they said, okay, this is a winner-take-all state. And so if the electors vote the way that they're supposed to, in other words, if the California people who voted for the Democratic candidate, in other words, who voted for the Democratic electors, are going to be well represented, then those Democratic electors are going to vote in line with their Democratic Party. Now, the interesting thing is, this is sometimes reliable, but it's not always reliable. The electors that we vote for don't necessarily have to vote the way that we think they're going to vote. And it actually has happened in several instances that the popular vote count did not equal the electoral vote count victory. You would think that the popular vote count would mean, okay, we have enough behind this, and that's going to be who wins the presidency. But it doesn't exactly work that way. It doesn't work that way for 2 reasons. First, because, like I said, we have this situation with the electors that they may vote in a different way. Not very common, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But the second thing to remember is that in this winner-takes-all system, you could very well have a situation where you have 51% of the vote in Texas going to the Republicans, 49% of the vote going to Democrats. Now remember, those Democratic votes don't count in the Electoral College. It's winner-takes-all. So it's like those votes didn't exist to begin with for the Electoral College system. However, for the popular vote, we're still counting numbers. We're still counting how many individuals voted for the Republican Party. And so you can see how if you add up a whole bunch of 49% in perhaps the larger states, you may get a really large popular vote count, whereas the Electoral College would change it a little bit because the smaller states, for example, which have fewer popular vote counts because of where they are in terms of population, but they're still going to have at least 3 because in the Electoral College, because remember they have to have at least 1 in the House of Representatives, at least 2 in the Senate, so that's going to make 3. So they could go red, and they could give you those 3, but say the Democratic votes underneath that are not very many, then it's not going to really add up properly. And we actually have 5 times to date where the popular vote winners have been defeated. The most recent time was in 2000. You might remember this. There was a big court case about this where we are looking at whether or not George Bush should win the presidency, And one of the big things behind that was the fact that he was actually not the popular vote winner in that particular election.